She vanished on a quiet Thursday in 1990. 10-year-old Emily Roberts was walking home from art club, and then nothing. No witnesses, no clues, just a devastated family and a case that turned cold fast. 15 years later, her father buys a dusty old VCR at a garage sale, and inside he finds something that stops him cold. A home video with a girl who looks exactly like Emily, only older. What follows is a gripping journey through memory, identity, and the kind of truth that refuses to stay buried. This is more than a missing person case. It's about what happens after the search ends, and how a whisper from the past can change everything. Watch until the very end. You won't believe what he discovers. Share your thoughts in the comments like if the story moved you, and don't forget to subscribe for more true-life narratives that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Cleveland, Ohio, spring 1990. It was supposed to be just another Thursday. The kind of gray April day Cleveland knew well, where the clouds hovered low and the air carried the faint smell of rain-soaked concrete. At precisely 3:45 p.m., the bell rang at Lincoln Elementary, and children poured out into the streets with paper projects in hand and backpacks bouncing against their spines. Among them was 10-year-old Emily Roberts, her sketchpad tucked under one arm, a blue windbreaker zipped to the collar, and a pink scrunchie holding back her honey-blonde hair. She was last seen at the corner of Euclid Avenue and 32nd, about 4 blocks from home. Her art teacher, Miss Langford, remembered her smiling, said she had drawn a picture of a carousel that afternoon. She was proud of it, the teacher recalled, told me she was going to show it to her dad right after supper, but Emily never came home. When the sun dipped behind the skyline and the streetlights flickered on, her mother, Diane, began pacing the porch, arms folded tight across her chest. By 6:00 p.m., her voice cracked as she called every number she could think of. Neighbors, classmates, even the school janitor. At 7:30, Thomas Roberts called the police. He'd been stuck at the machine shop an hour longer than usual, fighting with a jammed conveyor line. He didn't know, not yet, that every minute he spent trying to fix that machine would become a weight he carried forever. The first officer to respond treated it like a simple case of a girl wandering off. "Maybe she stopped at a friend's house," he said, jotting notes on a yellow legal pad, his pen barely moving. But by morning, when the sun rose on an empty bed and an untouched breakfast plate, it became something darker. They searched the neighborhood, then the park, then the lakefront. Dogs were brought in. Helicopters circled the woods near Edgewater. Volunteers handed out flyers with Emily's freckled smile on them. Missing, Emily Roberts, age 10, beneath bold red letters. Her drawing of the carousel, curled and crumpled, was later found in the bushes near an abandoned lot. But no backpack, no shoes, no body, and no answers. The media came fast. The Cleveland Gazette ran the headline, "Girl Vanishes on Walk Home." Local news stations interviewed neighbors, showing footage of Thomas and Diane pleading in front of their picket fence, hollow-eyed and holding hands like people clinging to the edge of a cliff. Thomas tried to hold it together. He gave statements, walked with search parties, nodded through interviews. But by the end of the second week, when the vigils turned into silence and the cameras moved on to the next tragedy, he came undone. He stopped shaving, quit work, spent entire nights sitting in Emily's room surrounded by stuffed animals and crayon drawings. The police found nothing, no leads, no suspects, just cold trails and colder phone lines. Diane couldn't take it. She moved in with her sister in Columbus the following winter. "I can't live in that house anymore," she told Thomas, her voice trembling like dry leaves. "I keep expecting to hear her come through the door." Thomas stayed. Every year on April 19th, the day Emily disappeared, he put fresh flowers by the mailbox and sat on the front porch until long after dark. He never packed up her room, never threw away her notebooks. He kept one photo in his wallet. Emily, age 9, squinting into the sun, a missing tooth in her grin. People told him to let go, but he couldn't. because something inside him whispered the same thing every single night. She's not gone. Not really. I'd know if she was. And in 2005, 15 years later, that whisper would turn into a voice. One he couldn't ignore. One recorded on an old VHS tape where a girl's laugh would send a chill through his bones. Cleveland, Ohio. Time didn't stop when Emily vanished. It just lost all meaning. In the days that followed her disappearance, Thomas Roberts clung to routine like it might pull him back from drowning. He woke at 6:30 every morning, just like always, made 2 cups of coffee, even though Diane stopped drinking hers. He packed a lunch he never ate and left the porch light on every night, because what if she came back? But after a few months, routine turned to ritual, and ritual turned into grief dressed as discipline. By winter, the house was too quiet. Diane moved out on a Tuesday. No screaming match, no slammed doors, just a suitcase by the stairs and her soft voice at the threshold. I can't live in a grave. Thomas didn't argue. He couldn't. Grief had turned him into something mute and hollow, a man whose world ended on a Thursday afternoon in April and never restarted. The room. Emily's bedroom became a time capsule. Her pink bedspread remained tucked neatly just as she left it that morning. Stuffed animals sat in rows on the windowsill like they were waiting for her to come home and play. The drawings she'd pinned to the corkboard, mermaids, rocket ships, a purple dog with sunglasses, faded in the sunlight over the years, but Thomas never moved them. He dusted the room weekly, vacuumed once a month, changed the sheets every spring. She was frozen in time, and so was he. The archive. In the basement, Thomas built something he called the board. It was a wall-sized grid of evidence: newspaper clippings, police reports, hand-drawn maps, phone numbers scribbled in shaky handwriting. Each item was pinned with precision, connected by red thread and labeled with post-its that curled at the edges. It looked like something from a crime drama, but for Thomas, it was scripture, proof that he hadn't stopped looking, that he couldn't. He kept every letter, every tip, every theory that strangers sent him in the years that followed. Some were well-meaning, some were cruel. One man claimed Emily was in New Mexico, living under another name. Another sent a photo of a girl on a playground in Idaho, circled in red ink. None of them were her, but Thomas followed every lead, just in case. The world moves on. Neighbors stopped asking how he was doing. The mailman dropped packages a little faster. The house became that house. Whispers at block parties, sideways glances during Halloween when the porch light was on, but no one answered the door. By 1995, the Cleveland PD had officially moved Emily's case to inactive status. Cold. A detective handed him a folder with the word "closed" stamped across the top. Thomas didn't yell. He just took it home and placed it on the board, where it stared back at him every day like a betrayal. Anniversaries. Every April 19th, Thomas placed a bouquet of yellow tulips on the front steps. Emily's favorite. He'd sit on the porch with a beer in one hand and her sketchbook in the other, flipping through pages worn from too much use. Carousels, clouds, a drawing of the family at the zoo. She'd written in pencil beneath it, "Best day ever." Neighbors would see him from behind their curtains. Some felt sorry for him, others whispered about obsession. But Thomas didn't care. He needed to believe there was still a thread, still a connection, still a path that could lead him back to her. 2005. 15 years. The tulips were harder to find now. His beard had turned almost entirely gray. Diane had remarried in Columbus. They spoke only once a year, on Emily's birthday. The calls were short, quiet, like two people treading water in separate oceans. Thomas lived alone. No pets, no TV, just shelves full of binders marked leads and possibles and dead ends. The Cleveland Gazette had stopped returning his calls. The police politely reminded him they were underfunded and overwhelmed. They always said they were keeping the file open in case new evidence emerged. But no one believed that anymore, not even Thomas. And yet, he kept searching, because the silence in that house was unbearable. Because every now and then, late at night, he swore he could still hear her laugh echo down the hallway. Because he still wore her school photo in his wallet like a secret badge of guilt. Because some part of him believed what no one else did. Emily was still out there. And one day, something, a phone call, a photo, a voice, would break the silence. He just didn't know that it would come from a dusty VHS tape buried inside a stranger's VCR, and that when it came, it would change everything. Toledo, Ohio, autumn 2005. It started with a garage sale, not the kind Thomas usually stopped at. He didn't need old golf clubs or chipped teacups. But this one caught his eye for a different reason. As he drove through a quiet Toledo neighborhood that Saturday morning, a cardboard sign at the corner of Maple and Kent read, "Moving out sale, everything must go." He didn't know what made him pull over. Maybe it was the overcast sky. Maybe the silence of the car. Maybe just the itch of boredom he couldn't quite scratch. Whatever it was, he parked across the street and stepped out. The sale was typical. Milk crates of vinyl records, a table of mismatched dishes, rusted tools laid out on a tarp. Kids sat on the porch eating popsicles. A man in his 50s stood behind the checkout table sipping coffee from a Cleveland Browns mug. Thomas wandered through the tables without much interest, but then his eyes landed on something that froze him mid-step. A black VCR. Panasonic, early 90s model. A sticker on top read, $5, still works. He picked it up. It was heavier than he remembered VCRs being. And when he turned it over, something inside shifted. A soft click. There was a tape inside. Thomas hesitated. "Does this come with the tape?" he asked. The man shrugged. "Haven't used it in years. Tape came with it when I found it in the attic. You're welcome to it." That should have been the end of it. Just another piece of forgotten tech from a time long gone. But Thomas had a strange thought as he handed over a crumpled $5 bill. What if this tape hasn't been watched in years? What if it's someone's home video, someone's memory? He didn't know yet that it would be his memory too. Back home, back in Cleveland, Thomas set the VCR on the living room floor. The television, an old RCA tube model, hadn't been used for more than news and the occasional baseball game. Dust danced in the shafts of light coming through the blinds as he connected the cables with fingers that trembled slightly. He clicked the tape into the slot and pressed play. The screen buzzed, then flickered to life. At first, static. Then slowly the picture cleared. A backyard barbecue. Laughter. Adults seated at folding tables under a white canopy. Children running barefoot in the grass chasing each other around a sprinkler. The footage was time-stamped July 1995. Thomas leaned forward watching closely. He didn't recognize the setting, but it looked like a modest suburban neighborhood. The kind you'd find just about anywhere in Ohio. Then the camera shifted, zoomed in on the kids, and that's when his heart stopped. A little girl in a blue sundress, barefoot, spun toward the camera. Her hair was tied in a side ponytail. She was maybe 6 or 7. She giggled, hands sticky from a melting popsicle. And then she smiled. That smile. Thomas dropped the remote. He stared at the screen, mouth slightly open like he'd seen a ghost. Because he had. The girl wasn't Emily. Not exactly. She was older than Emily had been when she disappeared. But her face, her dimples, the little scar above her right eyebrow, the shape of her eyes, was identical. She looked like Emily might have, 5 years later. He whispered her name. Emily. His chest tightened. He rewound the tape and played it again. Slower this time. pausing every few frames. Could it be? After all these years? A home video, found inside a stranger's VCR, purchased at a random garage sale over 100 miles from home? It was insane, but not impossible. Denial versus instinct. Thomas told himself it couldn't be real. The odds were microscopic. There had to be a logical explanation. Some other child, some shared genetics, a trick of memory. But as he stared at the screen, at the way she laughed and tucked her hair behind her ear, just like Emily used to, he felt something rise inside him. Something he hadn't felt in years. Not grief, not longing, recognition. This wasn't closure. This was a door creaking open. He didn't know the names of the people in the video. He didn't know the address where the barbecue took place or who the girl was. But he knew one thing. He had to find her. And for the first time in 15 years, Thomas Roberts felt like he was finally taking a step forward. Not toward healing, but toward truth. Even if it broke him all over again. Thomas didn't sleep that night. He watched the tape again, and again, and again. Every flicker of movement, every shadow cast across the lawn, every laugh caught on the aging tape's warbling audio. He studied them like they were sacred text. He played it at half speed, then quarter speed. He paused and photographed the screen with his old Polaroid, arranging the stills across the coffee table like puzzle pieces. But all that mattered was her, the girl in the blue sundress. Her name, her identity, her life, he didn't know any of it. But in his gut, deep in the part of him that had carried hope like a bruise for 15 years, he was certain. It was Emily, not a look-alike, not wishful thinking. His daughter, older, alive, somewhere. He replayed the moment she looked into the camera. She hadn't spoken, but her eyes locked on the lens with a flash of curiosity. And it was there, that flicker, that unmistakable spark that sent a chill through him. He'd seen that look 1,000 times. When she asked if he'd read her new poem, when she snuck ice cream after dinner, when she tried to draw horses with only 3 legs and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. He hadn't seen that look in 15 years, until now. Clues in the background. Thomas knew better than to chase ghosts. He'd done it before. False leads, dead ends, psychics who charged by the hour. But this was different. The footage was real, tangible. A thread he could follow. He began studying the background. Behind the girl, a banner hung between 2 trees. "Happy 7th birthday, Danielle." A clue. He scribbled the name down in a notepad. Beneath it, he jotted a list of possible search terms. Danielle, birthday party, 1995, Ohio, July 1995. Girl named Danielle, age 7 in 1995, Sackert born in 1988, VCR owner. The house in the video had a distinct feature, a faded mural on the backyard fence, painted sunflowers, childlike brush strokes. That detail felt personal, something unique enough to be found, maybe, if the neighborhood hadn't changed too much. The video lasted just under 40 minutes. Thomas watched it until the tape hissed with static and cut to black. Then he rewound it and started again. The cellar. The next morning, Thomas drove back to Toledo. The garage sale was gone, of course, but the house remained. Single-story ranch, brick, a swing set rusting in the side yard. He parked across the street and sat in his car for nearly half an hour, watching, trying to rehearse what he'd say, trying not to look like the kind of man who showed up unannounced with questions no one wanted to answer. Finally, he got out and walked up the driveway, knocked once, twice. The same man answered, still wearing the Cleveland Browns cap. "Morning," Thomas said, his voice steady, polite. "I bought the VCR here yesterday. I was wondering if I could ask you something about the tape that was inside." The man frowned. Tape? There was a home video. A birthday party. Backyard. Sometime in '95. I think the child's name was Danielle. Recognition flickered. Oh yeah, the man said. That must have been my daughter's party. She's 27 now. That was a long time ago. Thomas's heart pounded. You said you found the VCR in the attic, he asked. Yeah, belonged to my late brother, Marvin. He passed last year. Never had kids of his own, but he recorded everything. Never threw anything away. Thomas's throat tightened. Do you remember who the little girl in the blue dress was? Not Danielle. The other girl. Blonde. Freckles. The man hesitated. Could have been Danielle's friend. I think she had a few from school. Do you remember any of their names? Thomas pressed gently. The man shook his head. I'm sorry, I really don't. After Marvin died, we just boxed everything up. That VCR had been sitting for at least a decade. You're lucky it even turned on. Thomas handed him a card with his number. If you remember anything at all, please call me. The man nodded, but Thomas could see the wall going up. That slight lean backward. That instinctual discomfort when you sense someone's carrying a story that might be too heavy to hear. A new thread. Thomas drove home in silence. Back in Cleveland, he took the tape to a local video conversion shop. Paid extra to have it digitized by the next day. He wanted to upload stills, run facial recognition software. Anything that could give him a location, a name, a connection. He knew it was thin. A girl's face, a birthday party, a banner, and a fence mural. But he also knew this. 15 years ago, Emily vanished without a trace. And now she had left him one. A breadcrumb. And Thomas Roberts was going to follow it, no matter how long the trail. Thomas stared at his laptop screen like a man peering through a keyhole into another life. The video file was grainy but stable now, converted from analog to digital. He could rewind, zoom, take high-resolution stills, tools he never had 15 years ago when Emily first disappeared. This wasn't guessworks anymore, it was evidence. He paused at the 6:42 mark. There she was again, the girl in the blue sundress standing beside the mural on the backyard fence. The sunflowers behind her were lopsided and childish, painted by little hands, no doubt, but one detail stood out. In the bottom corner of the fence, faint but legible, was a name. H. Banks, July '95. Thomas blinked. He zoomed in. The letters were shaky, but clear. H. Banks. Not Danielle, not the birthday girl. Another child entirely. Perhaps the one who painted the mural. Perhaps the one in the blue dress. His fingers trembled as he opened a browser window. H. Banks, Danielle, Toledo, 1995. It was like trying to dig through sand with a spoon. Too many results. Too many dead ends. He needed to narrow the field. Then he remembered what the man at the garage sale had said. Marvin, his late brother, the man who filmed everything. He ran a new search. Marvin Banks obituary, Toledo, 2004-2005. There it was, a short notice in the Blade, the city's newspaper. Marvin Eugene Banks, age 58, passed peacefully. No spouse, no children, survived by younger brother Gerald Banks. Donations requested in lieu of flowers to a children's literacy foundation. Thomas clicked through to the guest book and scanned the digital condolences. One name caught his eye. We're so sorry for your loss. Marvin was always kind to our daughter Haley, the Grayson family. Haley. He clicked the name, but it was just a signature. No contact info. No city. Just a whisper in the digital void. Still, it was more than he had before. Phone calls and old numbers. The next morning, Thomas made calls. Libraries, county records, alumni offices. He asked about H. Banks, about Marvin Banks, about Gerald. Most people were polite, some were suspicious, a few flat out hung up, but persistence was something grief had carved into his bones. By late afternoon, he got a call back from an assistant librarian at the Lucas County Historical Society. She had found a record for a Haley Banks, age 6, enrolled in a Toledo public elementary school in 1995. The emergency contact listed Linda Grayson. Thomas's pulse kicked. The Grayson name matched the condolence note. Haley might have been in Marvin's care back then, or possibly even adopted by someone in the family. But why? And where was she now? The librarian read off the last known address. East Havenwood Drive, Akron, Ohio. Thomas wrote it down in block letters. The girl in the video, the girl he believed was Emily, was now going by another name, Haley Banks. The drive to Akron. The sun was setting behind him as he drove east on I-80, headlights flickering across signs and overpasses. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The cassette deck played nothing. Silence kept him sharp. He tried to manage his expectations. This could still be wrong, a coincidence, a dead end. But that small voice in the back of his mind, the one that had kept whispering she's out there, was louder now, bolder. And then he turned onto Havenwood Drive, a row of modest homes with chain-link fences and toy-strewn lawns. American flags fluttered from porches, the kind of neighborhood where neighbors borrowed sugar and watched each other's kids. Thomas parked down the street and sat for a moment, gathering his breath. 214 was a beige two-story with white shutters. A red mailbox stood at the curb. There was a wind chime hanging from the porch beam, and a child's bicycle leaned against the side of the house. He stepped out. The sound of his footsteps on the pavement seemed too loud. As he reached the porch, the front door opened halfway. A woman stood there, mid-50s, warm face, guarded eyes. "Yes," she said, cautious but polite. "Mrs. Grayson?" he asked. "Yes." "My name is Thomas Roberts," he said, voice steady but low. "I think we need to talk. I believe your daughter Haley might be—" "My daughter. Emily. Emily Roberts. She went missing in Cleveland. In 1990. Her expression didn't change at first. Just a blink, a pause. Then, slowly, her fingers tightened around the edge of the doorframe. "I think you should come inside," she said. Inside the house, the living room smelled faintly of lavender and old wood. Family photos lined the mantel. Thomas scanned them automatically, searching. One in particular caught his eye. A girl in a white graduation cap, standing between two adults. Same smile, same eyes. "Where is she now?" he asked. Linda lowered herself into a chair. She's in college," she said. "Kent State. She comes home some weekends." Thomas's throat tightened. "What's her name?" "Haley Marie Grayson." "Do you know where she came from?" he asked carefully. "How she ended up with you?" Linda looked away. "I didn't ask," she said quietly. "Marvin brought her home one day. Said she'd been abandoned. Said we had to help. I didn't know what else to do. I was a widow. I couldn't have children. He said it was legal, that he had a lawyer handle it." Thomas's voice cracked. "Did you ever report it?" "No, I should have. I didn't want to lose her. She was my whole world." He stood still, not moving, afraid any sudden shift would cause the room to collapse around him. "She doesn't know?" he asked. Linda shook her head. "No. We told her she was adopted, but we never gave details. She never asked. She never wanted to know." Thomas nodded slowly. Tears welled in his eyes. "But I need her to know," he said, "because she's not just yours." Linda wiped at her own eyes with shaking hands. "I know." They sat in silence for a long moment, strangers held together by something larger than either of them could understand. Finally, Thomas stood. Please, he said, voice trembling. When she comes home, call me. I don't want to hurt her. I just want her to know who she really is. Linda nodded, and with that, Thomas stepped back into the night. Not broken, not whole, but closer than he had been in 15 years. Because now her name wasn't just a memory. She had a face, a voice, a life. And for the first time since 1990, she had a way back home. 3 days passed. Thomas checked his phone every few minutes. He slept in fits, sitting upright on the couch like a man waiting for a call from the hospital. Something urgent, something that could shift the course of his entire life. The moment his phone rang, he picked it up so fast it nearly flew out of his hands. It was Linda. She's home, she said softly. She got in late last night. I told her a man had stopped by, someone who might know something about her birth. She agreed to talk. She's nervous, but curious. Thomas closed his eyes. Thank you. Today, around 3. Come by then. Akron, 3:04 p.m. Thomas stood at the foot of the Grayson porch again, heart pounding like he'd run a mile. In his jacket pocket was a small cloth bundle, Emily's favorite childhood necklace, a little silver heart on a pink cord scratched from years of wear. He didn't know if she'd recognize it. He didn't know what to expect. He knocked once. The door opened slowly, and there she was. Standing in the doorway, wearing jeans and a Kent State sweatshirt, her hair was a few shades darker than he remembered, now shoulder length and curled at the ends. She had a small stud in her nose. Her eyes, wide and cautious, locked onto his like she was trying to read him before he said a word. She looked just like her mother. But when she tilted her head, her expression shifted, and for a split second, Thomas saw his daughter at 5 years old, running barefoot through their backyard, yelling about frogs in the garden. "You're Mr. Roberts?" she said. Her voice was steady but wary. He nodded. "Yes, I'm Thomas. He stopped himself. He couldn't say your father. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I think I knew you once," he said instead. "A long time ago." She stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in." In the living room. They sat across from each other, the air between them thick with silence. Linda brought in tea, but quietly excused herself, leaving them alone. Haley, or Emily, watched him carefully, her hands folded in her lap. "You think I'm your daughter," she said. He nodded slowly. She didn't flinch, didn't laugh, didn't cry. "I've always known something didn't add up," she said. "There are no baby pictures of me. Nothing before I was around 6, just vague stories, and I don't look like anyone in the family." Thomas reached into his pocket and unwrapped the necklace. "I gave you this for your 5th birthday," he said. "You wore it every day for a year. You cried when the class broke." She stared at it, eyes narrowing. "I have that," she whispered. "It's in a box under my bed. I never knew where it came from." Her breath caught in her throat. "I used to have dreams," she said, "of a different house, a swing set, a red tricycle. I thought I made it all up." Thomas swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. "You didn't." She sat back, hands trembling slightly. "Who was I?" "You were Emily Rose Roberts," he said softly. "Born June 7th, 1980. You disappeared in Cleveland in 1990. You were 10. "That can't be right," she said. "I was born in 1988. That's what it says on my ID." He shook his head. "They changed it. When you were taken, or shortly after. I have school records, photos. I have the police file. Your disappearance was on the news for months." She was quiet for a long time. Then, in a smaller voice, "Did my mother look for me too?" He nodded. "For years. We separated. It broke us. But we both kept looking." A tear slipped down her cheek. Thomas didn't move. He didn't want to scare her off, but every cell in his body screamed to hold her. just once. "I don't know what this makes me," she said. "I don't know who I am anymore." He leaned forward, voice gentle. "You're you, whatever name you've lived with, whatever family you've known. But if you want answers, I'll give you everything I have." She nodded, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "I want to know." Later, that evening, they talked for hours about the day she vanished, about the police search, about her drawings, her bike, the way she used to make up songs about clouds. He showed her the photo he still kept in his wallet, the same one he'd carried for 15 years, faded, creased, but never once forgotten. When he finally stood to leave, she walked him to the door. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I'm here, if you want to know me." She hesitated, then did something he didn't expect. She reached out and hugged him. It wasn't long or tight, but it was real. And for Thomas Roberts, that was enough to carry for a lifetime. As he walked back to his car, his breath visible in the cold night air, he realized something profound. He had spent 15 years looking for a ghost, but what he had found was a woman. Alive, conflicted, brave, and against all odds, still his daughter. And she had looked him in the eyes and said, "I want to know." That was more than he had dared hope for, and it was only the beginning. The next morning, Thomas woke before sunrise. A dull ache pulsed behind his eyes, equal parts hope and dread. He had left Haley's house with a folder of documents, the original birth certificate, newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs of a smiling 10-year-old Emily Roberts. He needed to organize everything before their next meeting. By 7 a.m. he was at his desk in the small home office he'd converted into a case headquarters. He spread the papers across the surface. Some yellowed with age, others crisp and modern copies. Sunlight filtered through the blinds, dust motes dancing in its beams. He sorted the materials into piles. Official records, original 1980 birth certificate for Emily Rose Roberts. Amended 1988 birth record under the name Haley Grayson. Police missing child report dated October 12, 1990. Media coverage. Cleveland Plain Dealer front page article, 10-year-old vanishes after art club. Okushtiu the 13, 1990. Television stills from WKYC news broadcasts. Handwritten notes from Thomas's research. Photographs. School portrait, spring 1990. Candid snapshots of Emily riding her bike in the backyard. Yearbook photo next to her best friend, Jessica Miller. Personal mementos. The silver heart necklace he showed her. The drawing she made of their dog, Baxter, with stick figure family. He hesitated over the last item. The drawing. He remembered the day she gave it to him. Her proud grin, the crooked letters spelling, "I love Dada." He slipped it into a protective sleeve. Later that afternoon, Grayson residence. Thomas arrived at 2:45 p.m., 15 minutes early by design. He wanted time to breathe, to steel himself. The suburban neighborhood felt different in daylight. Quiet lawns, children's swings swaying in gentle breezes, mailboxes standing sentinel at each driveway. He carried the folder under his arm and the drawing in his jacket pocket. When he rang the bell, his heart thundered. Haley opened the door, dressed casually in a sweatshirt and leggings. She offered a tentative smile. "You brought it?" He nodded. "I thought we could go through these together." He held up the folder and then the drawing. "I found something else." She stepped aside to let him in. Inside, the living room was warm, filled with soft light and the hum of an air purifier. A steaming mug of tea sat on the coffee table next to an open notebook and pen. They sat facing each other. Thomas placed the folder between them and slid the drawing into view. "This was yours," he said quietly. "Drawn when you were 10, right before you disappeared." Haley leaned forward, tracing the childish lines. I remember Baxter. Her voice trembled. And Mom. She looked up, eyes moist. I don't even know her name. Her name is Margaret, Thomas said gently. Margaret Roberts. She never stopped searching for you. Haley closed her eyes and inhaled. Why did they change everything? Why did no one tell me? Thomas took a breath. The investigation stalled. Leads ran cold. Your mother and I were shattered. We split up. Margaret felt she couldn't raise you in Cleveland after so many reminders. Someone, an intermediary, arranged for you to be placed with the Graysons under a new identity, thinking it would protect you from the pain. They forged documents. They changed your name and birth date. Haley's hand shot up to her chest, clutching the necklace around her neck. She'd worn it immediately after they met. I knew that felt wrong. All these years, I thought it was just me. Thomas opened the folder to the amended birth certificate. This shows you as born June 7th, 1988, 2 years younger, different parents, different life. She reached out, fingertips brushing the paper. Why? Who made that decision? He hesitated. Detective Keller, the original investigator, believed the media frenzy would endanger you. He worked with a social worker and a judge who granted a closed adoption. They thought it was best for your safety. Haley exhaled shakily. They took my life away. Tears welled. My real life. Thomas closed the folder gently. I'm sorry, I don't have words to undo that, but I promise, from now on, you'll decide everything. I'm here to help you piece your story together. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. He handed her a tissue. After she wiped her eyes, she took a deep breath. What's next? She asked, voice steadier. Thomas looked at the documents laid before them. We keep digging. We contact people who were involved, social workers or anyone who might remember. We fill in the gaps. And you decide which pieces you want to incorporate into your life. Haley considered this. Then, with resolve in her eyes, she said, Let's start with the people who knew me before. That friend, Jessica Miller, she was my best friend in 5th grade. Thomas nodded. I have her contact from the Yearbook database. We can reach out. Haley stood, determination radiating. I want to see those old pictures, hear her stories. I need to know Emily. Thomas rose as well, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then Emily. Rose Roberts will guide us. Step by step. As they gathered the papers, a fragile partnership formed. Father and daughter navigating a fractured past toward a shared future. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the windows. But inside, a new light shone. The promise of truth, reunion, and the healing that comes from finally knowing who you are. Haley held the yearbook in her lap like it was a piece of forbidden history. The glossy cover had faded to a dusty blue, the edges worn, the school's embossed emblem barely legible. Lincoln Elementary School, 1990. Thomas sat beside her on the couch, watching silently as she flipped the pages. Each photo was a snapshot frozen in time, smiling children with missing teeth, awkward bangs, colorful backdrops. Haley's brow furrowed as she scanned the faces. Then she paused. That's her, she whispered, pointing. Jessica Miller. Thomas leaned over. A girl with curly red hair and bright, curious eyes smiled from the center of the page. Beneath her picture, Jessica M., grade 5. You used to ride bikes together, Thomas said. She lived down the street. You two made a spy club and thought your teacher was an alien. Haley smiled faintly. That sounds like something I would have done. You made her a bracelet out of yarn and soda can tabs, he added. Haley traced her finger down the page. How do you remember all of this? Because I wrote it all down, Thomas said softly. Every detail. After you disappeared, I made lists, notes, anything I could hold on to. I thought, if I ever found you, I'd want to help you remember too. She didn't speak for a moment, but he could see the gratitude in her eyes. Contacting Jessica. That evening, Thomas located a possible match on social media. Jessica Miller now lived in Cincinnati, worked at a veterinary clinic, and had a public profile photo. Still the same fiery curls, only now pinned back with sunglasses. He drafted a message. "Hi, Jessica. I believe you were best friends with a girl named Emily Roberts in 5th grade at Lincoln Elementary, Cleveland, 1990. My name is Thomas Roberts. I'm Emily's father. She disappeared in October of that year. We've recently found new information, and we believe Emily may be alive. If you remember anything, any detail, any memory, I would be grateful to speak with you. Respectfully, Thomas Roberts." They sent it from his account, and Haley watched him hit send with clenched fingers. The silence after was unbearable. 20 minutes later, Jessica replied, "Oh my God! I remember Emily. We were inseparable. I think about her every year on her birthday. Please tell me this is real." Haley's hands flew to her mouth. Thomas typed, "It's real. We think she's been living under another identity. Would you be willing to meet?" Jessica agreed. The meeting in Cincinnati. 3 days later, they drove to a quiet coffee shop near the University District. Haley was quiet the whole way, alternating between staring out the window and twisting the necklace around her fingers. Thomas didn't push her. He just drove, present but gentle, letting her decide the pace. Jessica arrived 10 minutes early. She spotted them first, her eyes going wide as she stepped forward. Haley stood, uncertain, until Jessica's face broke into a trembling smile. "Emily?" she said softly. Haley stared for a long moment. Then she nodded. Jessica laughed, then cried. The hug they shared was tight and fragile and 15 years overdue. Rebuilding a bridge. They sat at the table for over 2 hours. Jessica brought photos, snapshots of birthday parties, roller skating nights, a class field trip to the zoo. One in particular caught Haley's attention. 2 little girls wearing cardboard crowns, arms wrapped around each other. "I remember this," Haley said, stunned. "We had a sleepover. You had a dog named Muffin." Jessica's eyes filled again. "Yes, and we stayed up all night eating popcorn and making up fake languages." Haley shook her head, overwhelmed. "Why do I remember that and not my own name?" "Maybe because that part of you never left," Thomas offered gently. "The real you was always there. She was just waiting for a chance to come back." Jessica looked at Thomas. "I don't know what happened to her. But if she's found, if this is truly Emily, then I don't want to lose her again." "You won't," Haley said. That night. Back in the motel, Haley sat cross-legged on the bed, holding the photo of the 2 girls in crowns. "It's strange," she said quietly, "like walking into a house you haven't seen in years, and finding everything just where you left it." Thomas nodded. "You're rebuilding a life you never got to finish, piece by piece." "I feel like I've stolen someone else's story," she said. "Haley Grayson, that name, that life, it's not mine anymore. But I don't know if I can just become Emily again." "You don't have to be either," Thomas said. "You can be both, or someone new, whoever you choose to be." She looked at him. "Is that okay with you?" He smiled, the edges of his eyes soft. "As long as I get to know you, I don't care what name you use." Haley reached out and took his hand. For the first time in a decade and a half, Thomas Roberts felt something he'd only dreamed of, a future, and the girl who had vanished into thin air was no longer a mystery. She was here. She was real, and she was remembering. The next morning, Haley stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection like it belonged to someone else. Emily Haley. 2 names, 2 timelines, 2 versions of a girl who never got to choose. She wore a soft blue sweater. Thomas had said it was her favorite color when she was a child. Around her neck, the silver heart necklace gleamed faintly in the motel's dim morning light. "Do I look like her?" she asked as Thomas stepped out of the bathroom, drying his hands. He paused, not out of uncertainty, but because the moment deserved a breath before truth. "You look like someone who survived more than anyone ever should," he said. "And yes, you look like my daughter." She turned back to the mirror. "I want to meet her." "Who?" "My mother." The call. Thomas had been dreading it, not because he didn't want them to reunite, but because he feared what it might do to Margaret. The years hadn't been kind to her. She remarried once, divorced, moved to Oregon, taught at a local community college, and built a life that barely held together the memory of their daughter. He sat on the edge of the motel bed, phone in hand. Haley stood by the window, arms crossed tightly. The phone rang 4 times. Then Margaret answered. "Hello." Thomas's voice cracked immediately. "It's me." A long silence. "Tom," she said finally, cautious, "are you okay?" I think I'm better than I've been in 15 years, he said. "Margaret, I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to sit down." There was a pause. "I'm sitting," she said. He told her everything. The tape, the VCR, the girl in the video, the mural, the Graysons, the new name, the confirmation. Haley. When he finished, there was only the sound of breathing, and then a soft, shattering whisper. "She's alive." "Yes, she's alive." The sound Margaret made next wasn't a cry. It was an exhale of every prayer she'd ever muttered under her breath. Thomas could picture her folding in on herself, phone pressed to her chest as if it might let her feel her daughter through the line. "Can I—" Her voice broke. "Can I talk to her?" Thomas looked at Haley. She nodded, slowly, nervously, but without hesitation. He handed her the phone. "Hello," she said, voice barely audible. There was silence on the line. Then, "Emily." Haley froze. That name again, spoken with such raw tenderness that it felt like a cut and a bomb all at once. I don't know who I am right now," she said truthfully. Margaret's voice cracked. "You're my daughter. That's who you are. You don't have to remember everything. I remember enough for both of us." Tears rolled down Haley's cheeks. "I don't know how to do this." "We'll do it together," Margaret whispered. First flight. 2 days later, they boarded a plane to Oregon. Haley stared out the window the entire flight, her knees bouncing with restless energy. Thomas didn't talk much. He knew the noise inside her was louder than anything he could say. When they landed in Portland, Margaret was waiting at the gate. She didn't rush, didn't sob. She stood still as Haley walked slowly toward her, measured, cautious steps. And then, when they were finally face to face, Margaret reached up and gently cupped her daughter's face like it was something sacred. "You have my eyes," she whispered. Haley's lips quivered. "And Dad's stubborn chin." Margaret laughed, a sound halfway between joy and ache, and pulled her into a long, trembling embrace. For the first time in her adult life, Haley was wrapped in the arms of the woman who had rocked her to sleep, sung her lullabies, searched for her across years of silence. Thomas stood nearby, watching them with tears in his eyes, his heart no longer stuck in 1990. Later that night. They sat around Margaret's kitchen table. Old photos scattered across the surface. Emily as a toddler with cake on her nose, kindergarten graduation, a beach trip. Haley stared at them like artifacts of someone else's life, and slowly began to claim them. "This one," she said, pointing. "I remember this sweater." Margaret smiled. "You refused to take it off all winter." Haley looked between them. Her parents. Older, softer, scarred, and yet here. Still here. I don't want to go back to Haley, she said suddenly. I want to be Emily again. Margaret's breath caught. Thomas reached across the table, covering her hand with his. You already are. That night, as she lay in Margaret's guest room, the house silent around her, Emily stared at the ceiling and whispered her name aloud. Emily Rose Roberts. It felt like putting on a coat she'd long outgrown but never stopped loving. Familiar. Safe. Hers. Outside the window, the wind rustled the trees, and somewhere in that sound she swore she heard it, the laughter of a girl finally coming home. The days that followed felt like a life unraveling in reverse, memories threading back into place, names regaining meaning, stories returning to their rightful owner. Emily spent her mornings walking with Margaret through the neighborhood, listening to the details of a childhood she didn't remember, but now desperately wanted to reclaim. Afternoons were filled with old photo albums, shared meals, quiet tears. Thomas stayed in a nearby hotel, giving space, but always nearby when she asked. One evening, as twilight painted the sky lavender and gray, Emily sat on the porch with Thomas. They drank tea from mismatched mugs, wrapped in blankets, the air cool but not biting. I feel like I'm watching someone else's home video in my head, Emily said. I get these flashes, a blue tricycle, the sound of wind chimes, a song about ducks I used to sing, but nothing stays long enough to grab. Thomas nodded slowly. You don't have to force it. If it comes, but you're not defined by what you forgot. You're defined by what you do now. Emily looked at him, her eyes thoughtful. Then there's something I need to do. A visit to the Graysons. Linda Grayson had aged 10 years in the span of 1 week. When she opened the door to find Emily standing there, no longer uncertain but rooted in her own identity, Linda's mouth trembled. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said softly. I had to, Emily replied. There are things I need to ask. They sat in the living room where Emily had spent most of her remembered childhood. It didn't feel like home anymore. The furniture was the same. The scent of lavender still lingered. But something had shifted. The illusion had cracked. I want you to tell me the truth, Emily said. All of it. No stories, no softening. Linda nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. You were brought to us by Marvin, she said. He was always secretive, controlling, but I believed him when he said you'd been abandoned. I never saw papers, never met a social worker. I just wanted to be a mother. Emily stared at her. But you knew it wasn't right. I did, Linda whispered, but I was alone. And then you came and you were sweet, and you called me Mom, and it became easier to lie than to lose you. Did he ever tell you where he found me? She asked. Linda hesitated. He said, he found you crying in a parking lot, near a motel outside Cleveland, that it was storming and you were wet, scared, that your real parents had left you there. Emily blinked. That's not what happened. I know, Linda said, voice breaking. I told myself the lie so many times I started to believe it. Emily felt a sharp ache in her chest. Did you ever think to report it? Call someone? The police? I was afraid, Linda admitted. Afraid they'd take you away. Afraid of what Marvin would do, and I was selfish. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the truth heavy between them. Finally, Emily spoke. I loved you. I didn't know who you weren't. I was a kid. You were the only mother I remembered. Tears filled Linda's eyes. And I loved you. I still do, even if I never had the right to. Emily nodded slowly, then stood. I'm not here to punish you, she said. I'm just trying to understand the shape of the hole you helped fill. And the part of me you kept hidden. Linda rose as well, her shoulders sagging with guilt. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I know," Emily said. "I just don't know what to do with that yet." Then she turned and left. Unfinished justice. Later that night, Thomas made another call, this one to Detective Ron Keller, the retired officer who had originally worked Emily's case. He had kept in touch, off and on, and now he picked up on the second ring. "She found her," Thomas said simply. A pause. Then, "Thank God." "She remembers flashes," Thomas said, "but nothing about the night she disappeared, nothing about Marvin Banks." "That tracks," Keller said. "If she was traumatized, her brain might have protected her." "Is there any way to reopen the case?" Thomas asked. "Hold someone accountable?" Keller sighed. "Marvin's dead. Linda technically didn't commit a kidnapping, though what she did was still criminally negligent. But with the time past and no concrete evidence that Marvin abducted her, it'd be a tough prosecution." "So that's it?" Thomas asked, bitterness creeping into his voice. "No," Keller replied. "It means the system won't fix this. But she has the truth now, and that's worth more than any court verdict." Thomas hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling. For 15 years, he had wanted justice. But what he had now was something different. He had his daughter, and she had her name back. That weekend. Margaret hosted a small dinner. Emily invited Jessica, Thomas, and a few of Margaret's friends who had known her as a baby. The dining table was covered with food, candles, and laughter that sounded like healing. Midway through the night, someone asked, "Do you want us to call you Emily or Haley?" Emily glanced at her father, then her mother, and finally back to the group. "My name is Emily Rose Roberts," she said, steady and sure. "But Haley, that girl still exists in me. She got me this far. I think I'll always carry her, too." Margaret nodded, eyes misty. "Both of you are my daughter." And Thomas, smiling through tears, raised his glass. "To all the names we've carried, and the one we never stopped whispering." "Emily," he said again just to hear it out loud. "Welcome home." The first thing Emily noticed when she stepped into the old house in Cleveland was the smell. Dust, faded lavender, old books, and something else, something warmer, softer. A scent she couldn't name but felt like childhood. Thomas had kept the house all these years. "I couldn't leave," he said, unlocking the door. "Felt like I'd be walking away from you." The wooden floor creaked under her feet as she stepped inside. The walls were the same dull cream. The pictures on the hallway shelf hadn't moved. The coat rack still leaned slightly to the right. And then she saw it, at the end of the hall. The door. Her door. She turned to look at Thomas. He gave a small nod. Emily reached for the knob, hesitating just a moment, then opened it. The bedroom. It was like stepping into a time capsule. The pink bedspread, the stuffed animals lining the windowsill, the shelves with her picture books, a stack of Goosebumps near the edge. A tiny nightlight in the shape of a moon still plugged into the socket by the bed. Nothing had changed. She walked in slowly, running her fingers across the desk. Her fingers paused on a piece of tape stuck to the surface, where she'd once proudly displayed a finger painting. She remembered peeling it off when it curled at the edges. She was 5, maybe 6. On the wall above the bed was a corkboard filled with drawings. Most were faded. One showed a dog wearing a cape. Another was of a rainbow with people holding hands underneath it. At the center was a photo. Her and Thomas at the zoo. Her on his shoulders, both laughing. Emily sat on the edge of the bed. "I used to pretend I was an astronaut," she said quietly. "This bed was my rocket ship." Thomas smiled from the doorway. "You made me play mission control." She looked at him. "You saved all of this." "I didn't know what else to do," he said, "so I waited." Tears stung her eyes. "You really believed I was coming back." "I didn't know how or when. But yes," he said, "I never stopped believing. She reached for the stuffed bear on the pillow. Its stitching had come undone at the arm. "Mr. Pickles," she whispered. "I named him after the sandwich I hated." Thomas laughed. "You said if you had to eat pickles, they might as well be cuddly." Emily pressed the bear to her chest and closed her eyes. "Can I stay here for a while?" she asked. "Just be here?" Thomas stepped into the room, kneeling beside her. "This is your room, Emily. It always was." She looked at him then, fully, and this time she didn't just see the face of the man who found her again. She saw her father. She reached out and took his hand. I want to come home." Later, that night, she couldn't sleep. The house creaked in familiar ways, but her body was still adjusting to a different version of herself, one that had existed before she knew it. She lay on her back, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, dim but stubborn. Outside, the wind rustled the trees in the backyard. Inside, it was still. She rose, opened the closet, and found a small box tucked in the corner. Inside were her childhood keepsakes: old notes, a birthday card with glitter, a plastic ring, and a cassette tape labeled Emily's Songs. She remembered that tape. She remembered singing into a toy recorder, making up lyrics about clouds and crayons and wanting to live on the moon. Thomas had saved even that. She smiled, tears falling quietly. This was grief. This was healing. Both could exist in the same breath. A new beginning. The next morning, she and Thomas sat on the porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Kids waiting for school buses, a woman walking her dog, a teenager skateboarding down the sidewalk. "So," Thomas said, "what do you want to do now?" Emily thought for a long moment. "I want to keep studying psychology," she said, "but maybe shift focus. Trauma, memory, identity, maybe help kids like me." He nodded. "That makes sense." "I don't want to run from Haley," she added. "She mattered. She kept me alive. But I think I want to live as Emily now." Thomas smiled. "Whatever you choose, I'm with you." They sat in silence a while until Emily spoke again. "I think I want to repaint the room," she said. "Start fresh." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "Pink's not your thing anymore?" She laughed. "Not even a little." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small hardware store paint chip book. "I figured you might say that." She took it, smiling, and leaned her head on his shoulder. And in that quiet morning light, surrounded by echoes of a life nearly lost, Emily Rose Roberts began writing the next chapter of her story. No longer a mystery, no longer in hiding. Just a girl reclaiming her name, her family, and her place in the world. 2 months later, Emily stood in front of a modest podium at Kent State University, her palms sweating around the edges of a note card she'd rewritten a dozen times. The auditorium wasn't full, just a gathering of students, faculty, and local community members for a guest speaker series on trauma and recovery. She took a breath and spoke. "My name is Emily Rose Roberts. Some of you know me as Haley. For most of my life, I believed I was someone I wasn't. I had a name, a birthday, a home, but none of it was mine by choice. 15 years ago, I vanished. At least, that's what the newspapers said. The truth is, I was taken, not by a stranger in a white van, not by someone in the shadows, but by someone close, someone trusted, and for years, I didn't know who I really was. What I've learned since then is that trauma isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides in places you don't expect, like the way your hand tightens when someone calls you by the wrong name, or how your stomach knots when someone asks about your childhood and you have to invent a past that doesn't exist. But healing happens too. It's slow, uneven, sometimes beautiful, sometimes ugly. I'm still learning how to carry my truth, but today I carry it in my own voice, in my own name. She looked up from her notes. "I'm Emily, I'm here, and I'm home." The room was quiet for a moment. Then applause broke out. Slow at first, then strong, then thunderous. After the talk, people came up to her afterward. Some hugged her, some cried. A few just touched her arm as if to say, "I see you, I hear you." Thomas waited in the back of the room, proud, quiet, his hands clasped like a man who still didn't quite believe this day had come. Margaret had flown in too, standing beside him, tearful and radiant, and Jessica, her old best friend, clapped the loudest of them all. Emily walked down the steps and into their arms. "Your mother would have been proud," Thomas said. "She is proud," Margaret corrected gently, wrapping them both in a hug. That night, one last visit. Before heading back to Cleveland, Emily made a final visit. She stood in front of the simple headstone in a quiet corner of a cemetery in Toledo. The name, etched into the granite, was clear. Marvin E. Banks, 1947 to 2005 beloved brother. A quiet man. There was no mention of what he'd done, no footnote for the life he'd stolen, the years he'd rewritten, the identity he'd tried to erase. Emily stood there for a while, not in anger, not with forgiveness, but with clarity. "I don't know why you did what you did," she said softly, "and maybe I never will, but I want you to know that you didn't win. You didn't destroy me. You tried to rewrite my story, and I'm taking it back." She set a small stone on top of the headstone. A Jewish tradition her father taught her. One, he said, meant I was here. I remembered. Then she turned and walked away. Back in Cleveland, that weekend, Emily began repainting her childhood bedroom. She chose a soft gray with blue undertones. "Slate Sky," the label read. On the shelves, she placed framed photos of her present and past. One of her as a child with Thomas and Margaret, and beside it, one of her and Jessica at a coffee shop, arms linked and smiling. On her desk sat a folder. Inside it, the original police reports, the adoption papers, her birth certificate, both versions, and a typed statement of her story. She wasn't hiding anymore. This wasn't something to be buried. It was part of her. But not all of her. She was more than the girl who went missing. She was a woman who came back. A year had passed. Spring had returned to Cleveland, and with it came new blooms on the magnolia tree outside Thomas's house, the one Emily used to climb as a child. The neighborhood looked the same, but it felt different. Lighter, somehow, like the silence that had lingered for so many years had finally lifted. Emily stood on the porch in a denim jacket, coffee in hand, watching a father across the street help his daughter ride a bike without training wheels. She smiled at the wobbly victory and the child's high-pitched shriek of joy. Behind her, Thomas stepped out with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this?" she asked. "Something I found in the attic," he said, handing it to her. Emily sat on the porch swing and unwrapped the paper slowly. Inside was a small, square canvas. Her painting, the carousel. Slightly smudged, the corners worn, but unmistakably hers. The one she had drawn the afternoon she disappeared. Her breath caught. "I thought this was lost." "It was behind the water heater," Thomas said. "I guess some things just hide until they're ready to be found." She traced the faded pencil strokes with her fingertips. "You should frame it," he said. "I think I will." A letter arrives. That afternoon, a letter came in the mail addressed to Emily R. Roberts. Seeing her name written like that, undisputed, hers, sent a small thrill through her. She opened the envelope to find a card from Jessica. "I found the rest of the birthday photos. You're in almost all of them. Thought you'd want to see how bossy you were even at 10. Let's plan another visit soon. Love you." Inside were 4 Polaroids, Emily and Jessica blowing out candles. Emily posing with Mr. Pickles tucked under one arm, Emily laughing with her mouth full of frosting. She stared at the last one. It was her, mid-spin in that blue sundress, a blur of motion and sunlight. Unposed, unaware, free, she tucked the photo into the corner of her mirror. Not to live in the past, but to honor the part of herself that had waited all those years to return. New work, new purpose. Later that month, Emily began volunteering at a youth outreach center for children in the foster system. At first, she helped with art projects and meal prep, but soon the staff saw something in her, a connection, a presence. The children responded to her in ways they didn't with anyone else. One afternoon, a 12-year-old girl named Zoe asked her, "How do you know what it's like to feel invisible?" Emily didn't flinch. "Because I was," she said, "for a long time." That night, she stayed late to talk with the program director about pursuing certification in trauma-informed counseling. "I think this is what I meant to do," she said, "help people find themselves again." The final visit. On the anniversary of her disappearance, Emily returned to the spot where she'd last been seen, just outside the old elementary school, now closed, the bricks faded and vines crawling up the side. She brought tulips. Yellow, her favorite. Thomas and Margaret stood beside her. No ceremony, no media, just family. They laid the flowers at the base of the school sign, for the girl who disappeared, for the woman who returned, for the time that was lost, and the time that still remained. That evening, Emily opened a new journal. On the first page, she wrote, "I used to think I was a story that ended too early, but I wasn't. I was just a story with a long silence in the middle. This is the part where I speak again." Emily Rose Roberts. She closed the book and looked out the window, and for the first time in her life, the past didn't haunt her. It anchored her, because she had lived through the unthinkable. And now she was living, fully, finally, home, whole, and hers again.